Picked the wrong week and quit sniffing glue.
Welcome back, everybody. It's a new week. It's a new kit. It's a great time to be alive. We are going to be building a new model today, and it is the Colonial Shuttle Mark II from our good friends at Cozmic Scale Models. Keith has done an outstanding job with this kit, so much so that it really shortcuts a lot of what I normally do on a regular model. So without much further ado, let's get to the table and play our favorite game, which is Meet the Parts. Yes, we're going to play Meet the Parts today. Keith, again, I have to say this, and I'll be gushing throughout the length of this build, has done a marvelous job with this kit. You'll remember Cosmic Scale Models. They made the Delta Flyer kit that I made a few weeks ago. Geez, more than a month ago now. And I have to tell you that even in that short time, he has made leaps and bounds in the production of his kits. The quality on this is quite unsurpassed. Now, deceptively, it's not a complicated kit. There are not a lot of parts to it. So hopefully that's going to allow us to take our time and make the best out of what we're working with. Again, we have a variety of 3D printed parts. These are all 3D printed parts. They are not, and I mean, they're first generation. They're right off the printer. It's not a case of, oh, he made the 3D, made masters out of 3D and then, you know, cast them in resin. No, these are straight off of the 3D machine. I mean, look at that. Look at the beautiful quality you get on something like that. That is the gangplank ladder that goes from the second layer up to the first layer. And even on something as simple as the figures, these are much better, much more realistic than even the Delta Flyer figures that I used. So kudos on that. And he's left the smaller parts on the sprue, if you will, which in a normal kit that would be sprue, but those are the supports for the 3D printing. These are the two of the engine nozzles. What they look like when they're cleaned off. Look at the detail in there. It's amazing. Now, a few ground rules. I will not be lighting this. I will not be lighting it, and that's because no knock on Keith's kit here, but I've got a big lighting project coming up next, and I don't wish to do any lighting on this one. It would be tough to go in and change the batteries out. And I just did that on the, I just did the big lighting project on the Grissom. I've got another lighting project coming up after this, so I decided I do not want to light this. Also, and this is not a knock against the kit at all, but the way this is printed is so mighty thin. I mean, look at that. You can see my fingers inside there. This is almost as if it were a clear cast kit as far as how thin the walls are, and it would take so much light block just to make this light impervious to the light that it would end up gunking up a lot of the fine details that are printed into this kit. I think I mentioned this on the day that I unboxed this, but I am amazed at the engineering on this kit. Look at this. Locator pins. Something that'll help you put the kit together. Amazing. Cosmic Scale Models is truly a leader when it comes to the engineering of their 3D prints. So, like I say, not a lot of complicated building, but I really think it's going to turn out spiffy when we're done. As a secondary part of this kit, Keith has also sent me a bunch of what you would call scenic filler accessories. That's the word. Viper Bay accessories. And if you are looking to create the entire Viper Bay, he's got everything you're going to need for this. Now, unfortunately, I will not be. As much as I love it, I just don't have the room to simulate an entire launch bay. If I wanted to, believe me, Keith has got the he's got the materials here that would allow you to build almost an entire Battlestar if you're of a mind to, by the time you put all of the kits together and the accessory sets. There are 5 different Viper Bay accessory sets. He has sent me copies of each one of them. As I've said, I don't have the room to create an entire diorama, but I will be building these and setting them aside so that I could show you the true extent of what some of these are. And since Mobius makes a 1/72nd scale, or at least they used to, Tiny Viper that would be in scale with the rest of all of this. I mean, look at this. This is what I've been wanting since I saw that Tiny Viper. There's a set of Tiny Viper steps to go up to the Tiny Viper. So I'll probably, depending on how much time the rest of this takes, dig out that Mobius Viper kit and build it just to have it sitting next to it. And maybe we'll find some way of making an ersatz diorama. But I get ahead of myself. I have decided not to light this. I've said that. It will be in the landed position, which means it makes no sense for the engines to be lit anyway. But you certainly can. They are printed hollow with the end cap that fits on it like this. So you could light it if you are of a mind to. And these printed engines are magnificent when you consider that you're printing behind these tubes. This is all one piece, and yet you completely see around and behind all of these tubes that are added on. In the old days, those would be separate parts that you would glue down, but this is a mostly complete engine by itself. Like I said, you add the tip on it and bang, you're ready to go. And another thing he does that I wish more 3D modelers would get in the habit of, he marks the kits. Look, T1. It's almost like, you know, someone thought of putting part numbers on this thing. It's amazing. T1 or TL, top left. That's the top left engine. It goes right there. It's the top left. Also, he makes 2 different sets of landing gear. Well, he makes one set of landing gear with open landing gear hatches, or he makes the closed landing gear, so you can do it either way that you want. Again, they're all designated front left, so if I wanted to put that on, I could do that, pop it in place, and there's the landing gear cover. As I said, I'll be doing it with exposed landing gear, so I won't be needing those. But the part quality on this is astounding. The part count is not very high, so it's my favorite kind of model. What I would like to do first and all is normally I would be cleaning up kit parts on the first day. Well, there's no cleanup really needed outside of snipping these off of the sprues and doing a little, running a quick pass with a sander on it. I believe I am going to leave the pilots on the sprue to paint them, and then just snip them off when I'm done. This is the easiest way to hold on to them before you, or while you're painting them, before you have to put them in their chairs. The one thing I think I'm going to do first, though, today is I'm going to hit the deck here. This is the deck that goes in here, but I'm going to hit that deck with some primer. I'm going to hit the inside of this piece with some primer, and I'm going to hit the inside of this piece with some primer. So that's the first thing I'm going to do today. I wanted to show you the wonderful decals that come with this. Now this kit is a light enough color that it doesn't really need to have, you don't have to worry about whether or not these decals are backed in white, because it's a very light gray and it's not going to be a problem. But he does provide white decals, just in case that's what you want to use or you want to back them up for yourselves. So what we've got is a wonderful variety of decals, and of course this long one goes down the center of the inside. The ramp is going to be open. There's a gangplank door here that is going to be open, and so that you can look up inside there, and see at least 2 of these land rams. These are part of the optional accessories for the to fill out your launch bay. It's just different accessories. Now these have the design more or less like the classic Galactica. The design hasn't changed all that much from classic Galactica to new Galactica, so I will be using the new Galactica decals on it because everything else is going to have that same aesthetic, and I don't want to put the classic Galactica decals on it, although they are provided in case you are of a mind to use them. Let's see, yeah. Different numbers, and that's the design from the classic land rams. So now that we've kind of met the parts, first thing we want to do is take the main pieces and put the first coat of primer on them. Okay, those parts are out on the back porch drying. I've put a nice light coat of primer on them. And the last thing I need to do, or the next thing I need to do, it's not the last, there'll be plenty of other things to do. I'm going to eliminate the parts I won't be using. Try to minimize my clutter here. And I need to cut these guys off of the supports. And again, I don't know what printer he's using, but the man is a genius. Trying to find my nippers, because the support settings he's using, there we go, are tremendous, particularly for something as delicate as this. You do have a new use for your old sprue cutters. These are delicate enough, yet substantial enough, that you just pull them off like that. Look at that. Quick wipe with a file, and they are good to go. As I said, see, look at that. Didn't even need to clip any of those. That's how you know you got good supports. And this has been properly cured, because it's not springy, it's stiff, and yet they snipped right off. So, not much to do while we're waiting for the innards or the other parts to dry. I think I will go ahead and pop these on the ends, because, well, you know, I'm wondering, while I have it open, I should probably go ahead and paint inside there. These need to get a primer coat on them, because you have undersides here. I can prime the bottom of these. That way they'll be nice and covered by the time I put them on the hull of the ship. I can look at these land rams. The land rams are cute, but there's, you know, only 2 pieces to them. They make great set decoration. This one has a dozer blade that I'm going to put on the front of this land ram. So all kinds of mischief I can get into here. Yeah, let's talk for a minute about this floor. Yes, the floor has the floor right now. This is the floor insert that goes on along the bottom of the shuttle, and I gotta give Keith credit for this. Most other people would have been happy enough to print a flat piece, or even print this curved piece and then let it go. But he has carefully crafted a set of reinforcing girders into this, which do 2 things. A, they keep the shape, but more importantly, they keep the shape. And by that I mean resin printed pieces, particularly long flat pieces, as anybody who wants to revisit my travel pod days can tell you, can twist and warp and do all kinds of things if they are not cured properly. And by putting this girder shape in here, not only does he reinforce and give more meat to this piece so that there's less to warp, but also it reinforces the stability of the actual piece. Plus, you know, a nice way to run wiring if you are of a mind to do that. But what I need to do at this point is I want to go ahead and sink this down in before I attach the landing gear and the gear doors. I want to go ahead and put this floor in. Now I'm going to be treating the inside of this like almost like an aircraft or a cargo plane, and you'll see a lot of aluminum and other details in here. Of course I'm going to put the decal stripe down the center, but I don't know exactly how busy it's going to be inside there. I'm thinking I might want to make a pattern that looks like some sort of grid that you would tie down ropes and stuff to. So I might do that as a paint template. Just spray a pattern all over that and then glue it, and then put the decal over the top of that. Now this back gate detail, this back gate does not open. I'm assuming, you know, it could if you wanted to, but the front open gate is enough for me. So what I need to do is get out some epoxy and some clamps and just clamp this thing into place, and then I can set that aside and concentrate on some of the other bits. Okay, so I've got the floor glued in or epoxied in, and I've taken the clamps off of it, and I just can't help but tell you how much, I don't know if gravitas is the right word, substantiality, substantialness, beefiness, how much that adds to this kit. Once the floor is glued in, it's got a weight and a heft and a magnitude to it now that it just didn't before. What I want to do now is now that I've sanded down where I've overshot with the epoxy, I want to take this outside and hit it with another coat of primer again, just to knock down the gloss of the epoxy joints. But yeah, it just feels better now with having that floor in there. Okay, I've run into what could be considered a hiccup, and it comes out of a overabundance to be helpful, but ends up causing a problem too. The landing gear I'm putting in the doors with the landing gear on them, and they all have these little tabs on them, which are immensely helpful, that tell you which one it's supposed to go to. Like this is the front left landing gear set. You see this little thing here? Now this little tab is nigh on impossible to remove without breaking the structure of the landing gear. I don't know if it's designed to stay. Keith, I will say, if it's designed to stay, then that's not great, because you can see the number there, and that kind of bugs me. For an OCD person as myself, I see that number. So I understand what you're doing. You are trying to make it easy for people to put those doors in the right spot, and then put the landing gear inside and be done with it. But that's still there, and it bugs me. Now the only way I saw, or the first way I saw to get rid of those, was to snip them out with the nipper, with the sprue cutters. But every time I did that, I ended up breaking one or the other of these sides, and that leaves the only other way around that is to take a Dremel and just kind of either sand it out or cut it out. And getting a Dremel in there is kind of tricky, but I'm going to try it, because I tried using the scribing head, and it didn't help me at all. So let's see how we can work with this one. Let me see if I'm in camera. Let me just turn the camera around, because I am used to doing it a certain way where I can see what I'm doing, and I'll do it this way. Yeah, I think that's going to come out a better way to do it is to take the sanding head, something with a right angle on it, because you need to clean out that whole corner. Like I say, it was born out of a good impulse to help designate which, to let the people know which landing gear doors these are. But because they're two different sizes and two different sides, all you really need to do is to match up the contours of the arced side of the doors, and you'd have it set anyway. So I hate to say thanks, but no thanks. But basically, it's not all that required. You see, they'll fit in, and then you pop the landing gear over top of them, and then they kind of keep the doors in place. Where's my last set of doors? Here's my last set of doors. But it just ended up causing more trouble than it solved. I tell you what, before I put the landing gear in, I think I want to pre-shade. I just want to spray the inside of these bays with a not completely black, maybe the NATO black or rubber black, an almost black, because once these are in, it's going to be kind of hard to paint around them. This next message goes out for an audience of one. Keith, if you're listening, I have a suggestion for you. On these land rams, it would be so much better for the painter if the treads were separate pieces. I tried it both ways, one with just the skid and one with the cab attached, and neither one of them I got as the kind of coverage I wish I would have gotten. If you could break this apart so that the treads you could paint separately and then glue to the sides of this and then glue the cab on top, I think you'd get a much happier modeling experience, because it's hard enough to get the airbrush into here. It's nigh on impossible to get it into the insides. So take that with a grain of salt. Take that for the trusted advice that it is. But please, if you're going to redesign these, make it so the treads are separate pieces. Morning, everybody. It's Tuesday. It's day 2 on the Colonial Shuttle. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm pondering it, and I'm trying to think of ways to make it, not more interesting, because it's plenty interesting by itself, but I have to admit it's kind of bland on the inside. I have taken inspiration from cargo carriers and things, big vehicles like that, and I've come up with an idea that's, something a little bit different. I hope you like it. I've essentially sprayed the inside of this ship in aluminum, and what I'm going to try to do is simulate all of the tie downs and strap attachment places that you see in cargo netting and things like that, but in a slightly different universe, futuristic type of way. So what I've done is I've taken basically a bunch of screen material, and by screen material I mean material that used to be a screen, and I'm going to be attaching it to the inside of this to act like cargo netting of a sort. Particularly in this area here, and I'm looking for the piece that I don't seem to find anymore, and I'm wondering where it went. Oh, here it is. It's right in front of me. The thing about screening is it disappears when you're not looking in the right direction. This is the area in the center where the land rams would be. They come up this ramp, and then they would kind of park there. Now I'm going to have one land ram in here, kind of parked like that, even though I know, well, I'm assuming that since land rams have tank treads, they could turn pretty tightly, and I could probably park 2 of them sideways. if I were of a mind to. The problem with it is by the time you add this shovel on the front, it gets too long to go sideways, so it would kind of have to sit something like that if you were going to stack them. But then you run the risk of not being able to actually see any of the detail in there. So I'm going to have one land ram inside. This one, unfortunately, by the time you put the gun on it, is too tall. It doesn't fit under the deck the way that it should. So basically I'm going to take this piece of screening and somehow affix it to the floor, and that's where I'm lacking. The plan is that's the one gaping hole in the plan, because I don't want to use a glue that's going to fill in the holes in the screen, so I'm not exactly sure which glue I'm going to use, but it's going to fit in something like that. And then I'm going to cover the side walls with like pockets of that, so it acts like maybe it's a cargo net, or it's a just a place where you can make a bunch of rope attachments if you are of a mind to. I have another issue with the kit that is not really I mean, it's an issue with the design. It's was done as best as it could, but I noticed yesterday when I was playing, I had both of these parts together and I was zooming it around the room and playing and making zooming noises, that when you look up in it, you can see that seam, and that's going to have to be pretty much filled in from the outside. So I'm wondering if I could make something, either a piece of trim on the inside or something that would kind of disguise that joint. If I did something that overlapped, like it started to go up the side and like that, would that help in the instance that helped to disguise that joint? Hard to say. But I'm thinking of filling in these areas between the ribs with this screen material to kind of dress it up. And there's one big glaring area that really needs the help, and that is the bottom of the floor. Now when you put the cockpit floor in, it looks something like this, and everything is yay and happy and good from the top. But when you it's yay and happy and good from the top, as I've said. But when you put the you put this on the bottom on the bottom half, and then you look up through that main gate, you just see this big empty here. So I'm just going to put another piece of that there to act as if it were a top tie down, and I might hang some little wires or strings or something from it to give the indication that the tie downs are in use. But I just think it's something that would lend a little pizzazz to these flat featureless surfaces. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and cut them to size, and then maybe spritz them with a dark paint, either the German gray or something like that, to darken them up so that you would see more contrast. I kind of like the color that they are, but I think this bottom would give the effect of like almost like a rubber mat, so that your vehicles would have traction against it. Starting to think about the cabin now, and something's been bugging me about the placement of these bench chairs, and I know that the plans call for them to be something like this in 3 rows, but that kind of bugged me because it ended up with one of them being like right at the top of the stairs, and that didn't seem to be good transportation layout. So I'm thinking 2 like this, and then 1 there, which also gives you a clear shot at this door and a way to stay away from the stairwell there. It's kind of disconcerting to me that the Colonials don't care enough about their passengers that they would put any sort of railing over this death trap of a stairwell here. there should be some sort of railing that would keep you, from falling in there. But then again, science fiction is very notoriously unsafe. There are no seatbelts on the Enterprise. There are no railings on the Death Star. It's just OSHA has never been thought of when it comes to sci-fi. If I were an OSHA inspector on the Death Star, I think I'd have a full-time job. Here's how they show it in three columns like that. But like I said, that puts one of them right at the head of the stairs. So I kind of like them further back. And we're going to do something like that. Plus, people either like, if you're on a train, you're either going facing forward or you're facing backward. Only on public buses do you ever see any seats that, go sideways. So I figured these guys here maybe they paid a higher price for the window seats. Who knows? I'm still of a loss as to what color the carpeting or the flooring is going to be in here. As with any public transport, it would be a darker color. It wouldn't be something that would be easily stained. So I'm trying to think of what color that'd be. Probably some sort of jewel tone, but I don't know for sure. Something that will allow the chairs and the people that will be populating this to stand out against something that that the people will show up against. So I'm thinking some sort of contrast in color, because you have the officers in their dress blues, you have the pilots in their green jumpsuits or flight suits, and then you have black chairs. So I'm trying to figure out the best color balance for that. I don't want to go with just another gray. Maybe it'll be a tan, a medium brown, or maybe it'll be somewhere in the burgundy range. But I just don't know for sure. Welcome back. As you can hear from the sounds in the background, it is one of those days. I've got the plotter plotting, the printer printing, and the model maker making models. So I scratched my head and tried to figure out what would be the best adhesive to use to stick this screen material down. And my thoughts went to my ill-spent childhood, not childhood, but ill-spent career working in graphic arts, and pulled out a can of spray mount. Now I've had this can nigh on 10 years and I still am getting use out of it. It is I know it has to be at least 5 years old, if not, because I certainly haven't bought this since I retired. It has been it's been in the back of the closet behind all the paints, but it still works. So basically what I did is I just took the screen material that I painted with the rubber black. I flipped it over, sprayed it with the spray mount, stuck it down, and there you go. We have instant texture and instant matting. Now, I don't know anything about the longevity of this. I know when you spray mount paper and stuff like that, it lasts forever. But I don't know how well this is going to stick over time. So it'll be an experiment we will all be in on. But now that I've got the main mat down for the land rams, and I've got the main cargo netting over the door, and this is what I was saying. When you have looking at the model from underneath, now all of a sudden, well, let me get the camera up. Now all of a sudden you've got a nice texture up there, and I can add some greeblies and some detail to that. That'll be a lot more interesting to look at than just that flat plane of the underside of the cabin. And I'm going to cut pieces now and continue to fill in the sides going up to here on both sides. Okay, so I've got the last of the screening in, or the remaining screening in, and I had to resort to my old friend, the UV glue. The spray mount worked fine on these flat areas, but on the curve I found that the UV glue, the spray mount wasn't holding it to the curve the way I like it. So I just couple dabs of the UV glue that allowed me to position the screening just how I wanted it, hit it with the light, and it was set. So that's ready to go now, and I think this gives me an overall type of texture to the inside that I really like. And I'm thinking now what I might want to do is first see how this looks on top of it, and I think that looks pretty good. See how much area is going to be visible towards the back. Now this is not going to have a light inside it, so there's that off to be checked off. You don't have to worry about hiding a light source. So by the time you put that on there, that's going to look pretty good by itself. You could really go to town with the greeblies on this if you wanted to, as far as making all kinds of hooks and ladders and things that you would store in the back there. So really, I think what I need to do now is start detailing the cabin here. I got to figure out what color of carpeting that's going to be. Now I know the doorway, I put a medium blue on that back wall. I don't think I'm going to keep it that, because it's about the same color as the field blue guards that are going to be standing against it. So that's no bueno. I need to come up with something better there. Maybe a light gray with a dark gray accent. Morning everybody, it's Wednesday, and it's one of those days I feel like I'm running around like a crazy person. I did some work yesterday after I turned the cameras off for the day. I started playing around with some whites and some grays and some weathering for the top of the shuttle. Now here's a particular problem, or an issue to work around. Not a problem, but an issue definitely. And that is the windows. There are no windows provided with this kit, and that's fine, because in the grand tradition of filming models, you could present this kit without any windows in it. People would be completely understanding of that. However, it does pose a problem when you are painting, because any overspray is going to go in the windows. If you had a clear piece, a solid piece from the back, you could tape them off and isolate them that way. Problem is, there's a nice round window here on the corner that would have to be formed. It wouldn't be, if there were a post in the corner there, you could get away with putting some flat stock behind it, and you've got a window. But you run into a problem with the corner windows, because you'd have to form those. So I'm going to leave windows out of this. I'm not going to put any windows in it at all. Actually, it's going to give me a clearer view of the interior, since I'm not going to have any lighting. But I do need to block these off from getting the overspray to the inside, so I painted the area white, figuring that that's 90% of the work is already done. What I'm going to do is cut a mask that goes just around the outside frame there, and then I can lay it in place so that I don't get any errant spray, because the way this kit is designed, once you put the two body parts together, there's still a significant amount of work you need to do, because you need to clean that seam up and then paint over that. So what that entails is some cleanup work, and you're going to be spraying some white paint, so you're going to have to protect those openings. I've also been playing with the thruster scorches on the bottom, and some general atmospheric re-entry type of scoring, because this is a shuttle. It does go through atmosphere. It is going to get that type of abuse, whereas you might even have one or two laser hits on, depending on whether it's flying into battle or flying into a dangerous situation. But it's mostly going to be weathering from its own abuse, going into atmosphere or engine exhaust, things like that. But I'm also running into the problem of I'm splitting all of my interest, over 5 different portions of this kit, and I'm not really getting anything done. Not done. I'm getting every area addressed, but I'm not getting anything done. So I figured what I would do today is I would just settle my little butt down and work on this cabin, because the cabin's going to have to go in before we can do any of the primary hull sealing. So let's get the cabin done today. Now I've got the floor paint. I got the floor painted. Got the back wall grayed. I've got the gunmetal on the big bulky bulkhead door, and I'm dressing up the background now because we're gonna have these. I'm gonna have standing guards on either side of the door, and I thought I'd dress this wall up. But what can you dress this wall up with? Well, I'm gonna take the piece of paper, and I'm printing out some flags because the Galactica was big on their flags. Whether it was the flag of the Galactica itself or the flag of the 12 colonies, or what I prefer to think of as the Capricorn, well, I don't think of it, it is the Capricorn flag, but Caprica being the traditional patron saint of the Galactica. Each of the 12 battle stars represented, at least in the old series, each of the 12 battle stars represented the 12 colonies. The Galactica represented Caprica. Now, I don't know how much of that mythos was carried into the new series. I know that Capricans, the Adamas were from Caprica. So, there you go. It's a Caprican shuttle. It's a Galactica shuttle. It's going to be from Caprica. So, I'm going to print out a couple of Caprican flags, a couple of United Colony flags, and put them on the back wall, and that's going to help dress it up, give it a little bit of dimension, a little bit of interest. I've worked on the console, kept it kind of clean and graphic, because you're not going to see it a lot. You're only going to see it when you're looking in the window from kind of that angle, so there's no sense spending a whole lot of time on dressing up the console that you're not going to be able to see a lot of. Got the chairs ready to glue down and the pilots to go in those chairs. I'm going to split the pilots between who's actually flying. Like, I'm not going to have all 4 chairs manned, so that I can use some of these seated figures back here in the passenger seats. I'll double check, make sure the seated figures will fit the passenger seats. Yes, they do. So that'll give some life to what's going on in the passenger seats. The seats themselves I've painted up, and I think they're ready to go in. I make myself, one last time go around on it, make myself happy with where these seats are going to be, because there is no peg on the ground. And I think smartly so, this from Keith's point of view, because this allows you to set your floor plan up however you like it. I like it like that, where you've got one row of seats with an aisle in the middle. You're not blocking the top of the stairwell, you're not blocking the doorway here, and yet you've got one row of seating that looks out the window. So we're going to have some seated figures, and we're going to have some standing figures. Maybe put one chair kind of out at an angle, like the pilot has gotten up for a minute. The 2 main ones, I will have pilots in those chairs and seated. But once we get the cabin done, then we can move on to the next big thing. Okay, one of the things about having a pattern on the floor is it makes it very easy to line your stuff up against it. I am trusting that this pattern is perpendicular to the floor piece, so that when I line these up on the grid, then they are square and perpendicular to each other. So these were the hard ones because they've got no pegs. This is the easy one because it's chock full of pegs. So we're going to put this one down next, and then that will give me the positioning for the chairs. I need to see whether or not I can put the pilot in the chair after it's glued in place, or whether I have to have if the chair is pushed all the way up, can I still fit the pilot in it, or do I need to wait until my pilots are painted and then see about sliding the chair up? Let me see. Yeah, the way it looks like, the way the knees are on this console is I can't get the pilot up but so close. So yeah, I think I can put the chairs in place and put the pilots next to them. I just can't slide the chairs all the way up. Okay, well, I still have about 15 things going on at the moment. I wanted to take a second and do something showy and flashy, and that is to glue the top engines down. And in doing so, I found probably the first and only big gap that I've encountered with this kit, and that is the front engine, the front bit here where the engine curve is meeting the hull, and there's nothing there you can't put a little bit of putty into and take care of. But I'm elated. That's the first gap I've experienced on this kit. Also went back in, repainted the ceiling of the cabin, because you know, the further you get into doing something, a paint scheme starts to emerge. Because, you know, to be frank, I was just shooting in the dark here about what colors I was going to use on things. And this blue-green, which is the Tamiya light blue, it started to emerge as a secondary color for the cabin. And I used it on the side posts on all of the, well, it helps if you could see it. I used it as a side post on the chairs, an accent color. So I used it on the top of the console here. So I'm using it on the ceiling as well, and it starts to, like I say, you start to have color palettes emerging the more you work at stuff. All right, I've got the flags on the back wall now, and Keith, if you're listening, it's something you might want to think about adding to your decal sheet. But I mean, I just printed them on paper and cut them out and stuck them down. It actually gives it a little bit of dimension, but you know, if you're of a mind to, it might make a nice addition to your decal sheet. Pop that onto there. You can see the land rams and how they fit. As I said before, the one prevailing problem or issue to think about with this kit, frankly, it's not just this kit, it's kits like this, whether it's TOS, Galileo, or any shuttle really, that you're building the inside, and you have to make sure the inside is done and painted and perfect before you can finish the outside. So it kind of forces you to think sideways sometimes, because I like to get into an area or a groove where I am doing nothing but building. Well, you can't do but so much building before you have to start painting on something like this, and I generally like to do all my building first, then all my body work, then all my painting. But if you have a subject like this that has an interior, you've got to do your painting starting midway. And decaling, in this case, with decaling is something I generally like to leave until the very end, and you can't do that with this. You've got to get your decaling done, particularly any decals that go inside here. That has to be done before you button up the outside. So I know I shot myself in the foot somewhat, kind of, on this long decal that goes along the floor. I could still put some of it on the gate, on both of the ramps. Okay, I'm putting the decals on the inside of the landing bay, or the inside of the cargo bay of the shuttle. And again, since you can't take the top off of this thing once you're building it, or once it's done, I don't see any percentage in putting these decals back here, because you're not really going to be able to see them. So what we're going to do with the front part, and here's my thinking, and check me on this if you think I'm wrong. You're driving along in your little Land Ram. It could be snowing. It could be the blizzard on Ice Planet Zero, for all I know. And you're coming up on the shuttle, and you're home, and you've made it, and you're getting ready to drive up the ramp, and then you see the dotted line in the middle of the bay. Wouldn't it make more sense to see some of that line here, so that you could tell when you're driving in that you're lined up center on the ramp? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of this, because I'm basically a coward as far as putting it over top of the grid that the screen that I've put down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use up a good chunk of it on the front ramp, and then maybe a little bit on the back there, and see if we can get away with not putting any over the screen. Maybe a little bit back here. See, now you've got a nice ramp with a line down the center, and it'll help you with your arrival. Let me push the air out of this, and we'll be ready for it to set. Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, the gateway to the weekend, and work continues on the cabin, specifically on the Galactica Shuttle, and this is again from Cozmic Scale Models. I've been painting people today, working on the little tiny people. Lots of sitting pilots, lots of standing officers. That kind of makes sense. Pilots doing the actual work, officers standing around staring at them. So, you know, you pick one, you get one color, and then you kind of go down the line on all of them, and find one color that works, like the iridescent green for the pilot suits. I found a good mix that worked on, so I went ahead and did them all. Now, I find that I was trying to mix and match the people so that they weren't all, you know, a bunch of white dudes. So I tried to do a little mix up, some skin tones, some hair colors, things like that. I mean, there's enough consistency with the uniforms all being the same that you really wanted to pick out some different details on the skin and hair so that they didn't look like a group of gull-monging Cylons, you know, all looking the same. So that's been fun. I've been doing that this morning. Now I'm going through with a toothpick here and just hitting the highlights on some of the you know, not the buttons, but the shoulder patches and chest insignia, things like that on the pilots. You know, you can drive yourself crazy trying to hit the exact spot, but you know, just do just a little indication of it. And of course, the staggering amount of this that won't be seen by mortal man once you put them in their chairs and close the whole ship up. But that shouldn't stop you from, you know, enjoying yourself while you're doing the painting. I like to give each one of these guys their own story, and you know, this guy's got troubles back home. This guy's wife just ran off with him. This guy over here is dating this other guy, and is kind of upset that they don't pull the same shifts anymore. You know, just fun stuff like that, because you have to do something when you're working with the, you know, this tiny minutia, and you're all by yourself, and you make yourself nuts if you don't. So, see, is any of that on camera? Yes, it is. Just a little jot of color here and there, something that's going to pick up the light, because like I said, these guys are going to be hidden. Well, not hidden, but they're going to be in the cabin here, and if you're not shining a light in it, because this is not going to be lit, then you want to be able to see them, even if you're just holding a flashlight up to it. Just do a little bit of shoulder patch and a stripe down the center there. Just pick out a little detail. I have had to do the thing that we all know to do when we're making pilots, and that is amputating the lower legs off of them, because they can't fit the chairs up under the consoles with their full legs on them. So once you've picked out which guy or gal is going to be your pilot, then you have to start whittling away at their lower appendages, so that they will fit in the area where they're going to end up being. Now see, that one might have been a little heavy, but Not so bad. Just enough of an indication that, to quote Stevie Nicks, just an indication would have been just fine. Actually, I don't know if she wrote the song. I'm just saying, quoting her singing it. There you go, something like that. And I mix up the hair colors. Obviously, the standing officers, you're going to see some gray hairs. Now, Keith didn't make a bald character, so there's no saltai in here anywhere. But there's a surprising amount of detail in these tiny wee 1/72 scale figures. I was surprised once you put a wash over them, all that kind of detail just jumps out. Once I get these characters snipped off of their runners and glued down in place, I will be able to close this up. Now, I was at the hobby shop last night, picked up some flat white this time, so I do have some flat white. I didn't make that same mistake twice. And also some Tamiya Putty. I've never tried Tamiya Putty before. They don't carry the Vallejo Putty anymore, and this is a white putty that I'm going to be using to fill the gap when you put the two halves together. So that's going to be a fun little experiment. And the decals that I put on yesterday have dried. I put a flat coat over them this morning. They're looking good. And that basically catches us up to now. So I'm going to let these figures dry, and then I'm going to snip them off of their stands, put them in the places where they're going to end up being, and then touch them up one last time. I'm playing around with the crewmen. Keep your mind out of the gutter. But I am happy with where they are. Now that they're glued down, I can do any final weathering and touching up and painting that I'd like to do, now that I know that, like I say, what's going to show and what isn't. And you won't be surprised to know that a surprisingly little amount of this will show once you put everything in there. So you kind of push everybody to the outsides, and you push them up to the window. Anything past here, you're not really going to see. So unless you shine a light directly in. So I moved some passengers that I had here, some of the crewmen. I just moved them up to the front because that's really where they're going to be at their best advantage. So now I need to touch up the seats where they were, because nobody else is going to see this, but I'll know it's there, and I would want it to have been fixed, because I had them nice canoodling in the corner here, just a couple of them, taking a minute away from their duties. He said duty, but then realizing you weren't going to see them nary bit all. So unless Keith is designing a version of this with a removable top, there's not a lot of you don't get a lot of mileage out of doing a perfected cabin if you're not going to see great swaths of it. So best to keep things simple and graphic, and I think looking pretty good. If you were to take a look at it from that view, let's get this out of the way. If you were going to look at the consoles there, I try to tell a story out of it. You got these two guards back here. They're guarding this door. Two officers having heated words. Some off-duty pilots, active pilots, and of course the commander and his chief assistant there, or his lieutenant. And then this guy just staring out the window because his dad chewed him out again. Good. We're going to let that sit for a while, and then we're going to start thinking about what do we need to do to finish the interior of this so that we can close it up. I'm going to move my paints around, pull the bottom half of the ship forward here, get the ramp out of the way, but this will sit in here and it is almost ready to be glued in. And of course, once that's glued in, we can put the stairwell in. Can't really do anything with the stairwell until that's secured. I wonder, I'd have to look around, but I wonder if I've got any sort of spare photo etch or anything I could make a railing out of there, because that just looks like a death trap waiting to happen. We're going to have to do something about that, because you know, if it was just, you know, pilots and civilians, nobody would care. But you know, there's deck officers and commanders and everybody up there. We need to protect those poor children. We need to keep them from falling down that hole. I will take a look in my spares jar and spares box, see if I've got anything that you could put up there. Just doesn't seem right. I'm wondering. I've got a ton of this screening left, and I'm wondering if it would make any sense whatsoever to put some sort of screen around that. That could be fun. If I was going to make a railing and then put some screening up to it, that could be fun. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of screening in one model, but heck, you know, that could work. And I even had a piece that was spare the other day. Here you go. I knew I was saving this for a reason. I had a piece of this that was trimmed off that was long and skinny, and I could cut a piece of that. All I need to do really is find a very thin piece to make a railing at the top. Yep, that's my next project. I'm going to make a piece of railing for the top of this, and then we can glue it down. Let me cut this to length first. Let me mark it, see how long it needs to be. Let's see, it only needs to be till we get to the top of the stair rail. Yeah, something like about that long. That works. That dog will hunt. There we go. Okay, I just need to get a little bit of half round. Be right back. Okay, I wanted to get some last good shots of this while you could still see all the detail on it. Getting ready to glue it down to the lower hull and therefore isolate it forever. So get your last glances. I took some still pictures. I'll probably pop them in after this little bit of video, but all this detail that you may or may not ever see again, or just, you know, as a record in case something horrible happens. But we're gonna pop some CA on the supports here. That was a little bit too much there. Let me wipe some of this off. That was a little much. Actually, a Q-tip will do. Take some of that off. And here we go. The bottom of the deck has indents on it, but I am just making sure that everything is equally lined up. Want to make sure that that peg at the front is very accessible, and to make sure this is centered. And I think that's got it.
So say we all.
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 Okay, it's time for the big enchilada. Time to put part A into slot B. Time to add the top to the bottom to the to make this a complete shuttle. Now, this is a resin kit. which means you can't use your normal glues. You have to use either a CA or an epoxy, or you can use this UV glue, which seems to work about the same as CA does, but it waits for the light to hit it to cure. Got an issue with this. I could squeeze the whole thing together, so getting all of the points connected would seem to dictate doing a slow acting thing. I can't really do a CA because that would, you know, that bonds on contact, and that's no good. I'm kind of concerned that if I put too much clear epoxy on it, it's going to goosh out over top of the pins. So I'm kind of dancing around what it is I want to use, actually. Because this is not going to go down simply as that. There is some pushing and some straining that I need to do to make all of everything line up. And I'm wondering if I just put a tiny bit of epoxy on each of the pin tops, and then I can press everything together and you know, tape it down if I have to, and then I can go around the edge with either a CA or the UV glue, and then kind of bond that as I go, dress the edge up as I go, and then that might be the way to do it. It does. My concern is when you look inside, you can still see a couple, three of those posts, and you don't want to see sloppy gloppy epoxy coming out of the top of them. So what I think I need to do, I think what I'm going to do is just make up some of the 15-minute epoxy, the slow stuff, and just dab it in on these posts, and then squeeze everything together. And then once it's squeezed together, I can dress up the seam going around the edge with either CA or the UV epoxy, or the UV glue. Okay, the two halves are together. They are joined, and I only lost one of the landing gear covers. Keith, that's a great idea, but when you're wrestling to put these two halves together, you gotta expect some casualties on those, so I'm just gonna have to glue that one back on. Not that it didn't go together perfectly, didn't go together cleanly, but as I've said many times before, that's what putty is for. I've got a couple of big gaps on the side here that obviously will be puttied in. I've got an engine covering the one on this side, or a lot of that seam from there back, so I'm not wildly concerned with that. I'll dress it up, but I don't have to worry about making it too perfect, because like I said, there's a big old engine that covers a lot of that. But this area here's got to get filled in. A little bit worse on this side. Getting this area and up and around the nose is the important one. That's the showy seam, and you want to take care of that. So they'll be puttying a galore, but that's good because this is a great place to finish it for today. I'll put a strip of putty on there, let it be drying all night, and then we'll come back to it tomorrow and tackle it anew. Good morning, everybody. It's Friday, and I must say I am enjoying this Tamiya Putty. I didn't know what I didn't have an opinion of it one way or the other, except maybe I thought it was overpriced before I tried it. But because I've always liked the Bondo spot putty, and I still swear by that on large instances. But for tiny little touch-ups, this Tamiya Putty seems to do the trick. I was using the Vallejo putty, and it had to take a longer time to dry or to set up that I was really comfortable with. So I only used that very sparingly, and I figured this was going to be more of the same, but it sets up pretty quick. I know it's made for plastic. I didn't know how well it would go on the resin, and it seems to do just fine. Now this is an ugliness, and I need to paint over that. This area back here I'm not concerned with because it's covered with an engine, but I do want to get a nice even coat of gray paint on there first before I glue the engines down, so that when it'll be pre-shaded, so that when I paint the white on top of that, the shadow lines will look natural. So let me quick get out the old trusty brush of air here, and what I've been doing is just taking some of my normal primer and just spraying some into the cap of this and pouring it into my gun and using that as my primer. So let me do that. I have to mask up and do that off camera, and we'll come right back. Okay, at this point I believe I am finally ready to put these remaining two main engines on. They're just going to be glued and held just like that, and then left to dry, and then I'll see if they need to have any puttying, although I don't think they do. I think the joints are very close and tight on these. Much like the rest of this kit, I haven't had too much to complain about as far as the fit of anything, which in and of itself is a marvel, considering its printed nature. Sometimes printed pieces can cure if they're not, if they weren't printed exactly at the same time or on the same machine or whatever, they can cure and shrink at slightly different rates if they're not the same material and all that. And so far I have been very fortunate with this kit that everything is lining up. I'm just checking the alignment on the engines here, making sure that they are straight and square before I let the CA set up, that everything is straight and square here before yeah, there you go. Lovely, nice aligned engines on the back. Probably stand it up like this now. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Well, what do you know? Looking at it from this angle, I do see where I can stand to do a little bit of filleting in with some putty. So let's get that out now and do it just along the top edge here. That's the only place I'm really noticing it needs any. I've gone over the seam here, the main seam, a couple of times with progressively finer sandings of the primer, and then the putty, and then primer again. And I think we're to a point where I need to see what this looks like with some white on it, so I can see how much of that joint still needs to be dressed up. I think the gray may be deceiving my eyes a little bit, so let's put some white over that seam and then get a better assessment on it. Yeah, I think I'm ready to start the beauty passes on the white now. I have cleaned that seam. I've gone over it many a time. I've gone in and put in the putty where I've still got gaps here and there, and I've sanded that. So I think I'm to the point now where I just need to start laying on some white coats. Well, folks, I think that's where we're going to end week one on the Galactica Shuttle. I'm to the point now where it's well along the way. I could not rush it to finish it this week. I did not want to rush the painting. I needed to take my time on these seams. I think the seams look pretty good this time around. I still have a world of decals, and then we've got the land rams and the auxiliary vehicles and things like that. So there's plenty of stuff to do to fill out next week, at least the beginning thereof. But yeah, I'm really happy with this kit. This Cozmic Scale Models does not disappoint. I will tell you, Keith, I hope you don't mind me using the open forum, the landing gear covers, it was a nice idea for you to try to attach them the way that you did, but no, they just take too much they take too much abuse in the finished and building, especially since you want them to go on so early. Now, I suppose you could leave the landing gear off completely and put that on all the way at the end, but it's just so handy for when you're sitting it down and when you're working on it to have the landing gear in place, these little pads, because if you didn't, it would roll back and forth and things like that. So I I like the idea of putting the landing gear in early, but not the flaps, not the landing gear covers. So that's something to think about. But by and large, really happy with this kit. It goes together like a charm. The interior was a lot of fun. Now, like I said, I'm not lighting this, but I could see where somebody could really have a lot of fun adding the interior lights and all that kind of stuff to it. So until next week, when we will finish this up, we'll put the decals on, we'll finish the painting, do some shading, work on the auxiliary details and some of the landing bay accessories. Y'all be good to each other, be safe, be smart, get the shot if you haven't gotten it already. You know, now's not the time to be slacking off about that. And we'll see you here next time.
So say we all.
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 So say we all.